everyone. Welcome to the virtual MRC, where Devin and I are going to present advanced tactics to keep you ahead of the criminals. And I am so honored to present today with my colleague, Devin Nielsen, who's the Director of Fraud Prevention from Overstock. And it's a great pleasure to be back with you, speaking again on the MRC stage as a longtime member of the Merchant Risk Council and employee of American Express and a Certify. So thank you for joining Devin and I. It's so great to speak with so many amazing colleagues and community members. One of the things I value most about the Merchant Risk Council community is the willingness to share techniques and information as we all join in this shared fight against fraud.
Hello, thanks, Kristen. I'm really excited to present to everyone here today. I've learned so much from this community, and I just hope that we can give some of that back with this presentation. Through the MRC and other networking experiences, I've met so many great people, and I've learned so much and been able to bring that to Overstock.com and help fight fraudsters and help with customer experience and different things like that. Real quick, we just want to go over what the MRC community objectives are and what I think any e-commerce company has as their objectives. So number one would be to enable optimal customer experience. This obviously helps with increasing sales and repeat customers. Number two would be a frictionless customer experience because no one wants friction. And then three, identifying criminals that sneak through our controls. This is one of the more fun parts of the job, at least for me. And it's always great to try to have balance of identifying the criminals and creating a frictionless customer experience. So Kristen's going to go over some of the risk controls and the evolution and what we look at.
Great. Thank you, Devin. As we think about the evolution of fraud risk management, we can think about it from different entities of information that we use to evaluate orders and attempt to achieve those objectives. Information like the location of where an order is coming from, email information, and there's all kinds of great attributes we can create out of looking at the email handle or the email domain or other calculated features out of email. Device information, the payment and billing information, phone numbers, which could be shipping phone number if you are physically fulfilling orders, or billing phone number, the channel of which the order was placed, IP addresses and doing all kinds of location analysis, of course the consumer's history in shopping at your e-commerce site, as well as customer behavior. And what we do is we take these entities of information and evaluate orders in an attempt to achieve and apply advanced risk strategy controls via machine learning models to make effective decisions. Traditionally, the controls for fraud risk management have been focused entirely upon the payment event. However, as we all know, there's much activity that happens before the payment that can enable clients to both reduce friction and reduce risk as well. This Sankey chart shows the volume of traffic flow in sequence through an e-commerce website. You can see on the left here, the largest portion of volume that's coming in is from the e-commerce website itself. But then there's also some consumers that entered this, their journey on the website through either a search or a referral to their website. All of these events and their sequence and success at different stages can be critical information to assessing the risk of the payment event. And so, as I've always presented to the Merchant Risk Council community, one of the things I say is that the best way to improve decisioning is through introducing new information or creating very smart features from the existing information, so that in essence you can put on a pair of glasses and see more information about the transaction that you couldn't see in the past. And that's one of the ways that a certified digital identity is helping clients to make better risk decisions.
And now we're going to go over some of the use cases of having behavior and identity on your website. So at Overstock, we recognize the importance of capturing as much data as possible prior to the payment capture. Before, we didn't have any insight to seeing what goes on before the order was actually placed. Historically, we've always had only information at checkout. So the payment information, the device fingerprint, and everything was only captured at checkout. And when we enabled device fingerprinting and behavior on all of our pages, this helped us with a lot of these following use cases. It helped us identify risky and good customer behavior. So one of the first use cases is identifying malicious account creates. Before, we didn't have any visibility into regular account creates or malicious account creates, and in a lot of cases, fraudsters will create sleeper accounts, which are accounts that are enabled to age, so the fraudster has a tenured account to do password testing, credit card testing, and other malicious behavior. With this tool, we can now see that there's hundreds of sleeper accounts created on a monthly basis. A few days ago, my team found an account or an order where the account was aged 200 days ago, and through the behavior token, we were able to identify many other dormant accounts that were just waiting to get orders placed on them. The second one would be identify account manipulation, which is when the customer can change the email address, the phone number, different pieces of information, or bot attack. And then the next one, identifying bots. So Overstock uses another vendor to block bot activity, but with this service, we were able to identify a lot of other bots that vendor was missing. And in a few slides, we'll show you some examples of behavior that's clearly executed by a script to create account takeovers and commit fraud. Another use case would be to prevent and stop brute force attacks. Kristen will also talk about that in a few slides, so we can go into more detail. The next use case would be to prevent and stop account takeovers. Device information is an incredibly powerful tool that helps us link account takeovers or look for credential stuffing, different things like that. With this tool, we've been able to identify a lot more credential stuffing and mark the accounts prior to the criminal placing the order.
Thank you, Devin. And a few other use cases I'd like to speak about that we find other clients find value in. One is to prevent and stop screen scraping. So in working with some of our airline clients, especially low-cost carriers, what we have found is that they've had attacks where accounts have been created to go in and scrape the availability and the price of their tickets so that they could be resold. So this isn't necessarily a fraud event, but it is a policy that of course the airlines don't want someone going in and scraping their information. Another example is identifying promotional abuse. So we have some websites or some e-commerce clients that choose to limit the amount of a specific product that can be sold, like highly desirable, event tickets or PS5 or shoes or computer parts. And some of our clients choose to put limits on what can be sold or may introduce lotteries to restrict and ensure that only legitimate consumers can purchase a certain amount. And so what we've found is that there's been a lot of attacks where bad actors are attempting to create accounts to kind of work around and increase their probabilities that they'll get more of those goods and be able to work around the policy limits for lotteries. And finally, another use case, of course, I'd like to mention is about identifying good accounts. So in fraud risk management, sometimes we talk about introducing friction, but as Devin indicated earlier in the presentation, our entire goal is to have as many transactions as for legitimate consumers to just fly through seamlessly in our controls. And we have some financial institutions that we work with that are very strict around their multi-factor authentication for good reasons. And having this visibility to before the transaction actually happens, we're able to identify very good accounts that they can relax some of their strict conditioning on to enable a better consumer experience on their website.
And on the identifying good accounts, when I started in fraud 10 years ago, my job, or what I thought my job was only to stop the bad guys. So I'd cancel any order that looked like it was suspicious, and that it led to a lot of insults. And as I've grown our fraud department and our fraud team and worked with other vendors and everybody at the MRC, I've been able to find the better balance between finding good customers and malicious customers, and being able to bring down our fraud rate while increasing our approval rate. So that's another great just use case that I think a lot of people in the fraud space can miss easily when we're always focused on just capturing the bad guys and the bad behavior. Now we're going to go over an account create attack. So in this example, there were 270 accounts created in 1 hour. And you can see on the slide that all of the emails are very similar formats. They're all on a hosted account, so they all come from hosted accounts. Then the password length is all the same. It's 11 characters long, exactly 11 characters long, so that's easy to see. And then the font list attribute is all exactly the same. The criminal is clever, though. You can see that on each of the 270 accounts, they changed the IP address and the device ID. If we weren't monitoring this, we wouldn't have had the visibility that all of these accounts were created and likely to be aged later for policy or payment fraud. It's just a much more in-depth look at the information that we wouldn't have seen when the customer or the fraudster is only submitting something at checkout. And then in this example, this is an account takeover example. The fraudster must have had the access to the email address, and you'll be able to see here that they changed the email on the address, the email address on the account, and then they used a gift card on file, and then after the purchase, the email address was changed back. So this is a great example of an account takeover where the email address was basically logged into, changed, the order was made, and then the email was logged back out or changed again so that the customer had no idea what happened.
Thank you, Devin. And our ML models in a certified digital identity are trained to detect the sequence of accounts and to look for activity like this and then be able to flag it to our clients. Let's take a look at another example. In this presentation, we'll not go in depth onto the many different types of bots, both friendly and hostile, or different tactics that are used by bots. We'll save that for another presentation, hopefully at the MRC. But in this specific bot attack, there were 7,000 accounts that were created in a half hour, all using aliased email addresses. This actually was not a very sophisticated bot. While they were changing the IP address on each transaction within milliseconds, there was a clear pattern of aliasing the same email for all of these accounts. And it was the same user agent across all of these attempts. And the user agent is a string of text in a unique format per browser that identifies the browser and the operating system of the computer to the web server. So looking at it from this perspective, you can clearly see that these were all related, and our models were able to flag these as very high so our clients could appropriately action them. As I mentioned, we could do a 2-hour presentation on bots, and we'll consider that for a future time, but I wanted to share, as you all may imagine, that bot attacks can be quite dramatic and require immediate systemic actioning. For example, here's an image of volume of traffic through a normal day on a website versus this image, which shows the volumes during a login attack. Now, what the criminals often do is that they complete these attacks in short but intense spurts, or they may not even make spurts. They may just disperse them over time. So if someone was only looking at normal volumes, it may be really hard to see within a wider day or week's volumes. But viewed in smaller time frames, this, of course, attack is quite visible. How we handle detecting this is through smart features designed to detect these bursts or to look for consistency across different transactions over time. And then, of course, our machine learning model runs to detect these accounts impacted and provide a high-risk model score so that the client can take systemic action. Let's take a look at just one more example. This was a credit master attack, meaning the criminal had access to a card, and they were attempting to roll information about that card to get, or series of cards to have successful transactions completed. And in this case, the criminal attempted 1,215 combinations of MasterCard and Visa payment, where 50 of the 1,215 were successful, which is a 4% success rate, which is actually quite successful in terms of the criminal. You can see this attack was dispersed over time. It used all the same email, groups of different IP addresses, but the same amount in the same bit. And our model was able to pick these up and relate these and give back high model probability scores. So even though the issuer had approved these transactions because the criminal was able to successfully get the right combination of the last four and the expiration month, our ML models and the certified digital identity picked up these transactions and was able to help the client prevent, even though the issuer authorized the transaction, to prevent it from having fraud on their transactions. So you may be thinking these examples are pretty easy to detect when they're visually laid out in this manner. You can see the fraud and perhaps how the criminal may have thought about writing a script and walking through the various transactions. However, the value of a system like a certified digital identity provides is it enables these cases to be detected and actioned within milliseconds, while the millions of other transactions that are happening related to all of these other events are seamlessly sailing through your risk decisioning to fulfillment. So now I'll hand it over to Devin to speak about how we can action when you get a high model probability from an event like this. How can you action it as a e-commerce owner to make sure that you're preventing the fraud?
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. And just if you're a data guy like me, being able to have visibility into all of this is just amazing. I can spend hours just looking through and combing through all of the data, even though it's laid out in a very easy to read fashion. Historically, we review around 4% of our orders at Overstock, and sometimes that's 800 or 1,000 orders a day. But when you go into and look at all of the events, the behavior events and the digital identity events, there's hundreds of thousands. So it's across different pages, login events, account creates, different things like that. So we do need a way to action these, and we're going to shift focus to that. One of the ways you can action accounts is using MFA. At Overstock, we don't currently use MFA, but that's something my team and the security team are extremely interested in, especially if we utilize something like the high-risk scoring in the ADI model. It's a very, very small percentage of transactions. So if we triggered MFA on that, we would be able to stop quite a bit of the fraud prior to the checkout. Ideally, in that case, the account has good tenure history and a high-risk event happens, then MFA would be recommended to ensure that the transaction's authorized by the account holder.
Great, thank you, Devin. In some circumstances, such as malicious account creation, we actually recommend to clients to allow the accounts to be created, but to tag them to prevent them from any activity that could cause financial harm to your business. So in this way, you can keep the criminal guessing at your controls. They believe they've been successful because they created an account, but they would be stopped later when attempting to complete a payment. And so this is, an important tactic to not reveal your controls, because once you reveal your controls, the criminals may figure out a different way to attack. So this is one of the recommendations we give to our clients for specific circumstances when actioning events through a certified digital identity. In the cases where a set of legitimate accounts have been compromised, we recommend that clients force a logout on the account on all devices that may be logged in, and wipe key pieces of information, such as the payment data and fulfillment information, so that the criminals don't have access to that. And some companies that we work with select to do even more customer care beyond that. They may prepare their customer service representatives upon an inbound call from a consumer to educate the consumer that their account was at risk, and to ask them to change any other account password that may use that same user ID and password across any of their other accounts that they may have. Another option is to have their customer services team proactively reach out to the consumer to advise the same information. So each company that we work with has different policies, of course, and has different capacity within their operations. But at a minimum, we recommend to systemically wipe that information so it's not at risk. In the event of a severe high volume attack, we recommend that websites simply block further activity and give an error code. So an error code is another way to confuse the criminals around what happened, or the attacker to not reveal what your controls are, but just put up a confusing, or not necessarily confusing, but put up an error message so that you're confusing them and don't really tip to them what exactly happened.
Thanks, Kristen. And just speaking of the tagging accounts and wiping passwords, we currently do send all of our successful credential stuffed accounts to security. They'll send the customers an email and force reset the password. Currently, it's a manual process, but we're looking at this to be automated because that would be much easier, save time, and probably protect more of the consumers. And we don't currently show an error screen, but what we do is when we cancel an order as suspected fraud or confirmed fraud, we don't actually cancel the order in the system for a while because we don't want to alert the fraudster that that order has been canceled, so they'll just automatically create a new account and attempt it again. We also don't send them a cancellation email. We only do that to customers that we think the order may be legitimate. And we have used this service for our review rate. At Overstock, we review between 4 and 8% of the total orders. And with this service, we're able to look at some of the higher risk payments and lower risk payments and be able to pull those orders out of the queue. And then our last part of the slide is we wanted to kind of give you an idea of the controls that we use at Overstock. So I wanted to share that after implementing the service, kind of how much money it saved Overstock. And for this calculation, we have to determine the value of an account to our business. So our average fraud amount per transaction is significantly higher than $300. But as an estimate, we selected that incorporating the cost of servicing, risk of fraud, and many other factors, we would value one account at $300. So this is kind of on the low end. But with that, there have been 1,360 malicious account logins identified by the model, 600 bad account updates prevented, 1,200 accounts identified by the model as malicious bot activity, and 120 account takeovers prevented. This leads us to an estimate of $984,000 in value of accounts protected in a year time period. So this is only a year time period when we had this implemented on Overstock, but since then it's probably double or triple this just in the last 6 months. We've had a lot more fraud attacks and we've been able to prevent a lot more activity.
Great, so that concludes what Devin and I had prepared to present to you today. Devin, on behalf of myself and our certified team and our entire MRC community, thank you for your willingness to share your experience. And I hope that our community team members watching today have gotten value out of this, and we would be happy to take any questions. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you to our first speakers of the day. We're going to take a 5-minute break now, but up next, 2 more great options for you. Hear from SIFT on the alternative payments predicament, to accept or not. And in the fraud session, hear from Meta and LexisNexis about achieving equilibrium. They're going to discuss risk and the customer experience. Enjoy.